In the farthest reaches of the Orion expanse, where the stars grow cold and the law of the galactic dominion stretches across thousands of conquered worlds, there exists a place every warrior fears. A place not meant for battle, but for judgment. The Arena of Judgment. I had studied it for most of my academic career. As a historian of the Dominion archives, my work required me to document the rise and fall of species deemed problematic. Rebellious civilizations were rarely exterminated outright. No, our empire preferred spectacle, public proof of superiority, and so challengers were brought here, to the arena, to die. The structure itself was colossal, an ancient ring of obsidian metal embedded into the crust of a barren world. From orbit it resembled a dark crown pressed into the planet's skull. From inside it felt even more oppressive. Towering walls rose kilometers high, lined with observation balconies filled with nobles, warlords, scientists, and commanders from dozens of alien civilizations, all gathered for the same reason: entertainment. But today's spectacle was unusual. Today we would judge humans. A murmur rippled through the observation platforms as the prisoners were escorted into the center of the arena. 5 of them. Their chains clanked against the stone floor as Dominion guards forced them forward. The humans' armor was damaged, blackened by plasma fire from the battle that had ended their capture. Their helmets had been removed so the audience could witness their expressions. Bruised faces, blood on their skin, but no visible terror. I leaned forward from my observation station, activating my recording device. Subject species, human, I began dictating. Origin world, Earth. Classification, Category 12 Death World. Notable traits, fragile skeletal structure, limited natural weapons, comparatively short lifespan. I paused, because something about them did not match the records. Humans were supposed to be weak. The Dominion archives described them as persistent, yes, but biologically unimpressive compared to the warrior species that served our empire. Yet the 5 figures standing in chains below did not behave like defeated prey. They stood upright, alert. Their eyes moved constantly, studying the arena floor, the walls, the towers above, analyzing. One of them, a taller male with dark hair matted by blood, tilted his head slightly, scanning the massive gates lining the perimeter of the arena. He was not looking at the crowd. He was studying the exits. Curious. Beside me, a reptilian noble hissed with amusement. Pathetic creatures. They still believe survival is possible. Another spectator laughed through a mechanical respirator. Their species is infamous for denial. They refuse extinction even when logic demands surrender. The audience roared with cruel delight. Humans were new to the Dominion's arenas. Their defiance was considered charming in the way small predators sometimes amused hunters. But as I watched them, I noticed something that unsettled me. They were speaking, quietly. The microphones positioned around the arena struggled to pick up the sound, but fragments of their language reached my translator. 3 gates. Watch the air vents. Wait for the signal. Signal? I frowned. Condemned warriors rarely discussed strategy before execution, because strategy implied expectation of survival. A heavy mechanical rumble suddenly shook the arena. The crowd erupted into cheers. The first gate was opening. A massive wall of reinforced alloy slowly lifted, revealing darkness beyond it, a cavernous holding chamber where the Dominion's engineered predators were kept. The humans stopped whispering. Their attention shifted toward the gate. The towering man I had been observing rolled his shoulders slightly, testing the weight of the chains around his wrists. Then he said something that froze my translator for half a second. "All right," he muttered calmly to the others. "Showtime." The ground trembled as something enormous moved within the darkness behind the gate. Spectators leaned forward eagerly. Across the balconies, betting systems activated as nobles placed wagers on how quickly the humans would die. Seconds, minutes at most. After all, the creature waiting behind that gate had slaughtered entire military squads in previous arena battles. I focused my recording device. This would be the final documentation of a primitive species' overconfidence.
The gate lifted higher. A deep guttural roar echoed from the chamber beyond, so powerful that even the arena walls vibrated. The humans did not step back. They did not beg. Instead, they adjusted their stances. One soldier shifted his feet into the sand as if preparing for impact. Another twisted his chained wrists, testing the metal links again. The tall one inhaled slowly, steadying himself. Then he smiled, not a smile of madness, not a smile of despair, but the calm, terrifying smile of a creature that had already decided to fight. The gate slammed fully open. The monster emerged. It towered over the humans, 4 times their height, armored with bone plates and claws long enough to rip through starship hull plating. Its eyes burned with engineered rage as it charged forward, shaking the arena floor with each step. The crowd screamed with excitement. The humans simply watched it approach. And for the first time since arriving at the arena of judgment, I felt something I'd never experienced while observing condemned species. Uncertainty. Because those 5 fragile creatures standing in chains did not look like victims. They looked like soldiers waiting for a battle to begin. And as the monstrous predator lunged toward them, one of the humans whispered something that my translator finally rendered clearly. Now. And suddenly, everything changed.
The creature struck the sand with the force of a falling transport shuttle. Dust exploded across the arena floor as its massive claws tore trenches through the ground. The predator was a Dominion warbeast, an engineered nightmare designed by combining the most lethal traits of several apex species. Its muscles rippled beneath layered bone armor. Its jaw opened wide enough to swallow a human whole. And its roar shook the arena walls so violently that several spectators instinctively recoiled from the railing. The crowd erupted in savage delight. This was what they had come to see, a demonstration of Dominion superiority. 5 fragile humans against a creature capable of tearing apart armored vehicles. Even I, who had spent years studying the Dominion's biological weapons, expected the outcome to be immediate. The humans should have panicked. They should have run. They should have screamed. Instead, they moved. Not in chaos, not in desperation, but with terrifying precision. The tall human who had spoken the word now stepped forward first. He didn't attack. He ran directly toward the charging beast. Gasps spread across the balconies. Suicide? That was the only logical explanation. But just before the monster's claws could crush him, the human slid beneath its body, dragging his chains across the sand to throw a cloud of dust into the creature's eyes. At that exact moment, the others acted. One soldier sprinted to the left, shouting loudly, drawing the beast's attention. Another grabbed a loose fragment of shattered arena metal protruding from the ground. The creature turned, enraged by the sudden movement. It lunged toward the shouting human. The soldier waited until the very last second, then dove aside. The monster's claws slammed into the stone floor where he had stood. Cracks spidered through the arena surface. And before the predator could recover, one of the humans jumped onto its back. The audience fell silent. The human, smaller than the others, lean and fast, had somehow used the dragging chains as a springboard, launching themselves upward with reckless agility. They clung to the creature's armored spine like a parasite. The beast roared violently, twisting its massive body in an attempt to throw the human free. But the soldier held on, and then they drove something sharp directly into the monster's eye. The shard of metal. The predator shrieked. Not a roar this time, a scream. The sound echoed across the entire arena as the massive creature stumbled blindly, slamming into the arena wall with enough force to shake the observation towers. "Impossible," someone whispered beside me. But the humans were not finished. The tall human emerged from beneath the creature's body, chains still wrapped around his wrists. He seized the dangling links and hurled them around the beast's injured head. Another soldier grabbed the opposite end. Together, they pulled. The chains tightened around the monster's throat. The creature thrashed violently. One swipe of its claws nearly disemboweled the soldier holding the chain, but the human rolled away, sand spraying as he moved. The one riding the creature's back plunged the metal shard deeper into the eye socket. Again,
And again, and again. The predator staggered. Its massive legs trembled. The sand beneath it turned dark with blood. For several long seconds, the arena became a chaotic storm of motion. Dust, roars, shouting humans, and the sound of straining metal chains. Then, the creature collapsed. The ground shook when its enormous body struck the sand. Its chest rose once, twice, then stopped. Silence fell across the arena of judgment. Total silence. Thousands of spectators stared down at the battlefield. No cheers, no laughter, just stunned disbelief. I realized my recording device had stopped transmitting. My hands had frozen, because what I had just witnessed should not have been possible. Dominion arena predators were designed to slaughter trained warrior species. They were engineered to survive plasma fire and heavy artillery. Yet 5 humans had killed one with chains and scrap metal. Slowly, the soldiers stepped away from the corpse. Their breathing was heavy. Their bodies were covered in blood, some theirs, most belonging to the fallen monster. One of them wiped sweat from his forehead and glanced up toward the balconies. He gave a small, mocking salute. A ripple of outrage spread through the crowd. But beneath the outrage was something new: unease. I forced my hands to move again and resumed my report. Observation, I dictated shakily. Human combat behavior demonstrates extreme improvisation. Cooperative hunting tactics observed. Pain tolerance appears significantly above standard galactic baseline. As I spoke, I began accessing the Dominion archives on my datapad. If these creatures could accomplish this, then the records on their homeworld required immediate reevaluation. The database opened. Planet designation: Earth. Classification: Category 12 Death World. I felt my throat tighten as I read the environmental data. Atmospheric volatility, frequent planetary scale storms, predator density far exceeding galactic norms, surface gravity significantly lower than most inhabited worlds, entire ecosystems built on relentless evolutionary pressure. Species survived there only by constant adaptation. Failure meant extinction, which meant the dominant species of that world, humans, had evolved under conditions that would kill most intelligent life within days. Suddenly, their behavior in the arena made horrifying sense. They were not panicking because chaos was familiar to them. They were not freezing in fear because survival on their world required constant confrontation with danger. Pain, injury, predators, violence. These were not extraordinary circumstances for humans. They were normal. A slow murmur began spreading across the observation decks as spectators processed what they had witnessed. But the humans themselves did something even stranger. They did not celebrate. They did not shout victory. Instead, they regrouped. The 5 soldiers gathered together in the center of the arena. One of them retrieved the blood-covered shard of metal. Another tightened the chains around his wrists like improvised weapons. Then all of them turned, not toward the crowd, not toward the corpse, but toward the massive arena gates surrounding the battlefield, watching, waiting. The tall soldier spoke quietly. My translator caught the words. That was just the warm-up. The others nodded. One of them exhaled slowly and said something that sent a cold ripple through my entire body. They're going to send more. They said it with certainty. Not fear, not doubt. Certainty. As if they understood the Dominion's cruelty better than we did ourselves. And then I realized something deeply unsettling. They were right. Because even now, high above the arena floor, Dominion officials were arguing furiously. The crowd demanded blood. One creature was not enough. The spectacle must continue. Orders were transmitted. New gates began to unlock. Deeper beneath the arena, heavier containment chambers opened. I looked back down at the humans. They had already spread out across the arena floor, scanning the terrain, planning, preparing, adapting, as if they had been born for moments like this. The first gate began to rise again, then another, and another. The humans did not retreat. They simply tightened their grips on broken chains and sharpened metal. 5 fragile creatures standing against the Dominion's most lethal monsters. And as the arena gates opened wider, I began to understand a terrifying truth about the species called humanity. Deathworlders do not break. They escalate. And this time, The Dominion had just made the fight far worse.
The silence that followed the death of the first predator did not last long. Humiliation is not something the Galactic Dominion tolerates. High above the arena floor, command balconies erupted into heated argument. Dominion overseers leaned over glowing consoles, while dignitaries from dozens of species demanded the spectacle continue. The humans had embarrassed them. That alone was unacceptable. But allowing them to leave the arena alive? Unthinkable. I could hear fragments of the conversation echoing across the observation platform. "Release another." "No," one commander snarled. "Release all of them." That decision changed everything. Deep beneath the arena, ancient containment systems began to awaken. Warning sirens howled across the complex. Even before the gates began to rise, experienced Dominion officers around me stiffened uneasily. They knew what those alarms meant. This round would not be a test. It would be extermination. Below us, the 5 humans noticed the change immediately. They were already watching the gates, waiting. Then, the arena shook. Not once, but many times. Every gate surrounding the battlefield began to rise simultaneously. The metal walls groaned as massive locks disengaged. Dust fell from the cowering structures as centuries-old mechanisms strained under sudden command. And from the darkness beyond those gates, the monsters came. The first beast thundered into the arena with the weight of a collapsing building. Its armored body was plated with jagged bone shields, each one capable of deflecting plasma rounds. Behind it came another, then another. Massive quadrupedal predators designed for siege warfare, creatures large enough to overturn armored vehicles. But that was not the worst of it. High above the arena, smaller gates slid open in the upper walls. Something slithered out into the open air. Winged hunters. Their skeletal wings stretched wide as they launched themselves into the sky, circling like vultures above the battlefield. Within seconds, the arena transformed into a storm of predators. 6 ground beasts, 4 aerial killers, all converging on the same target. 5 unarmed humans. A murmur of uneasy whispers spread across the observation decks. Even seasoned Dominion warriors shifted uncomfortably. "This is excessive," one armored officer muttered near me. "They will be torn apart instantly," another replied. But as I looked down at the humans, they were not panicking. Again. Instead, they did something that confused every strategist watching the arena. They separated. The tall soldier sprinted directly toward the arena wall. Another human ran in the opposite direction, shouting loudly and waving the blood-covered chain above his head. 2 others moved toward a cluster of broken debris near the arena's central pillar. The final soldier, the agile one who had blinded the first predator, did something even stranger. They ran directly toward one of the incoming beasts. The crowd erupted in shocked laughter. Surely this was madness. The armored predator charged forward, its massive body shaking the sand beneath it. The human kept running. Closer. Closer. At the last possible moment, the soldier changed direction sharply, sprinting toward the arena's half-open gate. The predator followed. Its massive armored body could not fit through the narrow gap. The result was catastrophic. The predator slammed into the metal braces with the force of a crashing transport ship. The supports snapped. One enormous beam collapsed downward, straight onto the creature's neck. The arena thundered as the creature collapsed beneath the wreckage. Gasps rippled across the balconies. Another predator roared in fury and charged across the battlefield. But now, the humans were already moving again. Near the arena wall, the tall soldier had reached a section of damaged structure. Several metal braces jutted out from the stone where earlier impacts had cracked the wall. Without hesitation, he began climbing. Climbing, like a predator scaling a cliff face. Below him, one of the armored beasts noticed the movement and lunged forward, jaws snapping toward the human's legs. But it was too late. The soldier pulled himself onto a narrow ledge halfway up the wall. From that elevated position, he grabbed a loose metal strut and shoved it downward. The heavy beam fell directly onto the charging predator's skull. The impact did not kill the creature,
But it stunned it long enough for the next phase of the human strategy, because another soldier was already running straight toward it. The predator roared and charged. The humans sprinted toward the arena's central pillar, a towering structure used in previous combat scenarios. At the last second, the soldier dove behind the pillar. The predator followed blindly and collided head first with another charging predator coming from the opposite direction. The sound of the collision echoed across the arena like thunder. Two massive creatures crashed together in a storm of bone armor and snapping claws. For a moment, the entire battlefield descended into chaos. Predators attacking each other, winged hunters diving through the air, humans sprinting between them like ghosts in the storm. I realized my breathing had become shallow, because something terrifying was becoming clear. The humans were not merely surviving, they were adapting. Every movement was teaching them something new: how fast the predators moved, how they turned, how they attacked. With every encounter, their tactics evolved. One soldier deliberately lured an aerial hunter lower into the arena. Another human used a broken chain to snag the creature's wing mid-flight. It crashed violently into the sand. Moments later, the same soldier used the fallen beast as bait to draw two ground predators into another collision. The crowd that had once laughed now watched in horrified silence. Around me, Dominion analysts began frantically recording data. "Observe their coordination," one scientist whispered. "They are adjusting strategy in real time." Another officer looked pale beneath his helmet. "They are studying the predators." Studying. The word echoed in my mind, because it was true. The humans were treating the arena not as a prison, but as a battlefield laboratory. And with every passing minute, they were becoming more dangerous. Below us, the 5 humans regrouped briefly near the arena's center. One of them wiped blood from a deep wound across his arm. Another leaned heavily against the arena's central pillar, breathing hard. They were injured, exhausted, but when they looked at the remaining predators circling the arena, their expressions held something disturbingly familiar. Determination, not desperation. Determination. Then the tall soldier spoke again. "All right," he muttered to the others. "Now we know how they move." The remaining beasts roared and began charging toward them again. The humans spread out once more. And in that moment, I felt something ripple through the observation decks, a feeling rarely experienced by the scholars of the Dominion. Not curiosity, not amusement, fear. Because the 5 humans standing in that arena were slowly transforming the Dominion's greatest symbol of power into something else entirely: a battlefield. And throughout galactic history, one fact had been recorded again and again in war archives across countless systems. On battlefields, humans had a terrifying reputation, and the Dominion had just given them one. The arena had become a storm. Dust spiraled through the air like a desert hurricane as predators clashed with one another and the 5 humans who refused to die. The once pristine battlefield of the Dominion was now scarred with trenches, shattered gates, and the corpses of engineered beasts. From my observation platform high above the chaos, the scene no longer resembled the carefully controlled spectacle the Dominion prided itself on. It looked like war. Below us, the humans were still moving. Slower now, more injured. One soldier limped heavily as he ran, blood trailing behind him in the sand. Another clutched his side where a predator's claws had nearly torn him open. But they were still fighting, still adapting, still refusing to collapse. The remaining predators circled them cautiously now, no longer charging blindly. Even these engineered monsters had begun to recognize something dangerous in their prey, something stubborn, something relentless. Above me, Dominion commanders finally reached the conclusion everyone had been avoiding. "This ends now," one of them growled. He slammed a clawed hand against a glowing console. "Prepare the execution phase." That command silenced the remaining debate across the observation decks. The execution phase. It was the final measure used when arena combat failed to deliver a satisfying result. Heavy weapons mounted along the arena walls would activate simultaneously, Plasma cannons, automated turrets, and gravity traps designed to erase whatever remained on the battlefield. No creature survived it, not even Dominion warbeasts. Below us, the humans had just regrouped near the shattered central pillar. They were breathing hard, exhausted. For the first time since entering the arena, they looked cornered. One of the soldiers stared up at the observation balconies, squinting against the harsh arena lights. Another scanned the arena walls where hidden weapon ports were beginning to slide open. Perhaps they understood what was coming. Perhaps they had finally reached the end of their impossible survival. Then, every console in the command balcony flashed red. A sharp alarm burst through the arena's speaker systems. Dominion officers froze. "What is that?" someone demanded. A technician hunched over the sensor display, his voice trembling. "We're detecting signal interference." "Source?" The technician hesitated. "Orbital." The entire balcony fell silent. The arena world had some of the strongest orbital defenses in Dominion territory. Nothing approached it unnoticed. Nothing breached it. Yet the alarms continued screaming. I leaned toward the tactical display hovering above the command platform. Dozens of blinking signals that appeared at the edge of the system. Ships, fast-moving, aggressive, and unmistakably unfamiliar. "They're not broadcasting Dominion identification codes," another officer whispered. One of the admirals stared at the display for several seconds before speaking a single, chilling word. "Humans." A ripple of shock swept through the balcony. Impossible. The Dominion fleet controlled this entire sector. No enemy force could simply appear above one of our most important arena worlds. Yet the sensor readings did not lie. The ships were small, far smaller than Dominion warcruisers, but they moved with startling speed, weaving through defensive grids with reckless confidence. They were not trying to hide. They were charging straight toward the planet. Inside the arena, something strange happened. The humans stopped fighting. The remaining predators still prowled nearby, but the soldiers suddenly seemed distracted. They were looking upward, toward the sky. One of them tilted his head slightly as if listening to something only he could hear. Then he laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not the laugh of a dying man. It was a relieved laugh, a victorious one. And in that moment, a horrifying realization struck me. The humans were not trying to escape. They had not been fighting simply to survive. They had been fighting to stall. Above the planet, the first human strike craft punched through the upper atmosphere. Dominion defense cannons fired immediately, streaks of plasma lighting up the sky like artificial lightning. But the human ships moved like predators diving through a storm. Small, fast, difficult to track. Several were destroyed in brilliant explosions, but the rest continued descending toward the arena complex. Inside the arena, the soldiers stood together now, watching the sky, waiting. The first object appeared seconds later. It fell from the clouds like a meteor, a massive metal cylinder surrounded by blazing re-entry flames. The crowd gasped. "What is that?" someone whispered. The object slammed into the arena floor with the force of an orbital bombardment. The entire structure shook violently. Sand and debris erupted into the air as the cylinder buried itself halfway into the ground near the human's position. For a moment, everything went quiet. Even the predators hesitated. Then the metal cylinder split open with a thunderous explosion. The hatch blew outward. Steam and smoke poured from the opening. Inside, weapons. Human weapons. Rifles, armor, tactical equipment. The 5 soldiers moved instantly. Their exhaustion vanished like a switch had been flipped. They sprinted toward the drop pod. One grabbed a rifle and slammed a power cell into place. Another tore open a crate and pulled out armored plating, snapping it onto his chest with practiced speed. The transformation was immediate. Moments ago they had been prisoners. Now they were soldiers again. High above the arena floor, Dominion commanders shouted in panic, "Shoot the pod! Activate the turrets!" But it was already too late, because the sky was no longer empty. More objects were falling, dozens of them, Orbital drop pods streaked through the atmosphere like burning stars. One crashed near the arena wall. Another smashed directly into a predator, crushing the massive beast under its impact. The arena floor trembled with every landing. Pod after pod slammed into the battlefield, each one splitting open to reveal more weapons, more armor, more humans. The audience that had gathered to watch a spectacle of death now stared in stunned silence, because the arena of judgment had just become something else entirely, a battlefield. The tall soldier, the one who led the others since the beginning, snapped the bolt of his rifle and glanced upward toward the observation balconies. Even from that distance, I could see the expression on his face, a calm, dangerous smile. He lifted the rifle and pointed it toward the arena walls where Dominion security forces were rushing to respond. Behind him, the newly arrived human reinforcements stepped from their drop pods, weapons ready, armor gleaming beneath the arena lights. The soldier spoke into a small communicator attached to his collar. His voice carried through the arena's audio systems. "Extraction team, this is Bravo Squad." He paused, scanning the battlefield one last time. Then he said the words that made every Dominion officer on the balcony go silent. "Thanks for the pickup." The humans raised their weapons, and the arena of judgment, the greatest symbol of Dominion power, had just become the opening front of a human assault. The real battle had only just begun.
The transformation was immediate. Moments earlier, the 5 humans in the arena had been wounded prisoners fighting with scraps of metal and broken chains. Now they stood armored and armed, and the difference was terrifying. The first rifle shot cracked across the arena like a lightning strike. One of the remaining predators, a massive armored beast circling near the central pillar, collapsed mid-charge as a focused burst of kinetic rounds shattered the bone plating around its skull. The creature dropped into the sand with a thunderous crash. The human who fired didn't even look back. He was already moving. "Perimeter," the tall soldier barked. His voice carried the authority of battlefield command, cutting through the chaos with practiced precision. The other soldiers obeyed instantly. 2 of them sprinted toward a cluster of shattered predator cages near the arena's eastern wall. Another climbed the wreckage of a collapsed gate structure, dragging a heavy rifle with him as he ascended. More drop pods slammed into the arena floor around them. Each impact shook the ground like distant artillery. The pods split open one by one. Inside were more humans. Some carried compact rifles. Others hauled crates of equipment, moving with disciplined efficiency as they formed defensive positions. I realized with growing horror that what we were witnessing was not a chaotic rescue. It was a planned military operation. High above the arena floor, Dominion command platforms erupted into panic. "Deploy security forces immediately! Seal the arena exits! Activate suppression fields!" But the arena of judgment had never been designed to repel a coordinated military assault. It had been built for spectacle, for carefully controlled battles where the outcome was predetermined. The humans exploited that weakness instantly. Near the arena's eastern wall, several soldiers overturned the broken predator cages, dragging the heavy metal frames into position to create a makeshift barricade. Another team hauled explosive charges from their drop pods and began attaching them to the arena's automated trap mechanisms. I watched one soldier kneel beside a control panel that once triggered environmental hazards during arena matches. Within seconds, he rewired the system. The result came moments later. A charging predator ran directly across one of the arena's pressure plates. Instead of releasing another monster, the plate detonated. The explosion tore the creature apart in a storm of sand and fire. The humans were turning the arena's own traps against its creators. Meanwhile, the soldier who had climbed the broken gate structure reached the top of a towering observation pillar. From that elevated position, he deployed a long-barreled rifle and began firing downward with devastating accuracy. Every shot struck a target: predators, security drones, Dominion guards rushing toward the arena floor. One by one, they fell. The arena had become a fortress, and the humans controlled the high ground. Below him, the tall human soldier moved through the battlefield like a storm. He issued commands rapidly through his communicator. "Bravo 2, cover the western gate. Delta Team, fortify the drop zone.
"Watch the airspace, those flyers are still active." Even as he spoke, one of the aerial predators swooped down from above, its skeletal wings slicing through the air. The creature shrieked as it dove toward the human positions. Before it could strike, two soldiers turned their rifles skyward. A synchronized burst of gunfire shredded the creature's wing membranes. The beast crashed violently into the arena wall and slid lifelessly to the ground. The humans barely reacted. They had already moved on to the next task. Watching them felt different from watching any Dominion army. They were not fighting with brute force alone. They were thinking, adapting, improvising. Near the center of the arena, a group of reinforcements assembled a portable turret salvaged from one of the drop pods. The weapon roared to life seconds later, spraying controlled bursts of heavy ammunition across the battlefield. The remaining predators scattered under the barrage, and still more drop pods continued falling from the sky. Each one delivered new supplies, new soldiers, new tools. The Dominion commanders on the balcony shouted desperately into their communicators. "Where are the security divisions? They are mobilizing. How long?" "Minutes. Minutes." I looked down at the arena again. Minutes was far too long. Because the humans were not merely defending themselves, they were reshaping the battlefield. Explosions rocked the arena's south gate as human engineers placed demolition charges along its support beams. With a thunderous detonation, the massive structure collapsed inward, sealing off one of the primary entry points Dominion troops would use to storm the arena. Another team constructed barricades from shattered arena seating platforms. They moved the heavy metal structures with surprising speed, locking them together to form reinforced defensive walls. The once glorious arena of judgment was rapidly transforming into a human stronghold, and they were doing it with terrifying efficiency. Beside me, a Dominion military strategist whispered something under his breath. "This is battlefield doctrine." I turned towards him. He was staring down at the humans with wide, horrified eyes. "They're not improvising randomly," he continued. "They're following structured combat protocols." Another officer leaned forward, scanning the tactical displays. "They're establishing defensive sectors," she muttered. "And look at their positioning." She zoomed in on the arena floor. The humans had formed a defensive triangle around the central drop zone. High ground snipers on the towers, heavy weapons near the barricades, mobile units patrolling the open areas. It was a textbook defensive formation, executed flawlessly. The first Dominion security transports finally appeared above the arena moments later. Armored dropships descended rapidly, their engines roaring as they prepared to deploy troops onto the battlefield. The crowd watching from the balconies leaned forward with renewed anticipation. Surely now the humans would be overwhelmed. Dominion security divisions were trained warriors equipped with advanced armor. Hundreds of them would storm the arena at once. Even the most skilled fighters could not survive such an assault. Below us, the tall human soldier watched the incoming dropships. He spoke calmly into his communicator. "Contact inbound." Around him, every human soldier adjusted position instantly. Weapons raised, turrets repositioned, explosives armed. They were ready. The first Dominion transport landed heavily near the arena's northern wall. Its ramps slammed down. Armored troops poured out in disciplined formation. Dozens of soldiers, plasma rifles raised. They advanced toward the human barricades. For a brief moment, the battlefield fell silent, two armies facing each other across the sand. The Dominion forces began their charge. Then the humans opened fire. The arena erupted into chaos once more. Rifles thundered, turrets roared, explosions ripped through the sand as human demolition charges detonated beneath advancing Dominion troops. Within seconds, the front line of the Dominion assault collapsed. Armored soldiers fell beneath precise, coordinated gunfire. The humans fought with frightening discipline. Every movement supported another. Every shot covered a teammate. They were not simply surviving, they were dominating the battlefield. High above the arena floor, a slow realization spread through the Dominion command platform. We had made a catastrophic mistake. The arena of judgment was supposed to break enemies. Instead, it had given the humans exactly what they needed: a battlefield. And now the Dominion troops storming the arena were no longer facing desperate prisoners. They were facing a fully armed human combat unit, one that had spent the last hour studying the terrain, learning the enemy, and transforming the most feared arena in the galaxy into their own fortress. Below us, the tall human soldier fired another burst from his rifle and watched a Dominion squad retreat behind cover. He exhaled slowly. Then he spoke calmly into his communicator. "Extraction teams, hope you're almost ready." Behind him, human forces tightened their defensive perimeter. The Dominion army was still coming. Hundreds more soldiers, heavy vehicles, orbital weapons preparing to fire. But the humans did not look afraid, because they had already achieved something the Dominion had never imagined possible. They had turned the arena of judgment into a human battlefield. And on battlefields, humans were notoriously difficult to defeat. The real question now was not whether the humans would survive. The real question was how much damage they would do before they left. And judging by the fires already spreading across the arena complex, the answer was going to be devastating.